So I thought we would try a bit of an experiment. I purchased some stainless steel and some bamboo needles, and I'm going to knit up a gauge swatch in each of these to see if my gauge changes between the bamboo needles and the stainless steel needles. I have always knitted on bamboo needles. For the last 10 years, I've used the Clover Takumi needles, and I have the interchangeable set. Even if I'm buying other needles like double pointed needles, I'll usually go for the Clover brand because I'm used to them. They are easily accessible. I can buy them at Joann, and I just like the feel of bamboo needles. I remember when I was first learning how to knit, I tried all sorts of different knitting needles, stainless steel, bamboo. I don't think I've ever tried other types of wood, and even some like plastic acrylic needles. And I just always preferred the bamboo, and I like the way that my tension feels on the bamboo needles. I feel like they help me keep a consistent tension. Recently, I decided that I want to knit the Cumulus Tee by Petite Knit, and I was looking at the gauge and the needle size and the yarn, and I realized that I'll need a US 1.5 and a US 2.5, or a 2.5 and 3.5, I believe. No, 2.5 and 3 millimeter needles, and I don't own any of those. So Clover doesn't make, or I couldn't find the option to purchase the needles that I'm used to. And I've been seeing a lot of people using the ChiaoGoo, I believe it's called, stainless steel needles. I know that you can buy ChiaoGoo needles in bamboo, but just looking at Amazon, I couldn't really find them on Amazon. They had the stainless steel ones, so I thought it would be fun for me to give it a go, to knit up a gauge swatch with stainless steel and to knit up a gauge swatch with some bamboo needles. The bamboo needles I got are these Prim needles. I've never used these before either, so I'll be interested to see how this goes. I've always kind of heard that different materials can give you a different gauge, so I'm really interested to see if that's true. I'm also interested to see if I prefer using stainless steel needles now over the bamboo needles that I have always used. I'm really interested to try them because I haven't used anything other than bamboo needles for a long time. But really the point of this video is just to compare what a gauge swatch with bamboo versus stainless steel needles looks like, and if there's a difference between the two for me. Going to start with the stainless steel needles. I've also heard people remark on this red lace cable. I don't know, I've been pretty happy with the cables that come with the Clover needles. They're just kind of a regular plastic. So I was really curious what this would be like, and it definitely seems like it might be more heavy duty. The other thing that will be different is that the needles I have are really short tips. I haven't measured them to see what length they are, but these tips are much longer than the ones that I have. And then the Prim, both of these were around the same price too. So this cord, or this cable, feels pretty similar to the cables that I'm used to. These tip lengths, they're a little bit shorter, while overall they're about the same length. So, but these tip lengths are still longer than the ones that I'm used to. So I'm gonna start with the ChiaoGoo and cast on a gauge swatch. Okay, I've been knitting for about 20 minutes now, and I have some thoughts on the stainless steel needles. So, I always give myself a little bit of time to kind of get into whatever I'm knitting, because I feel like The first few rows, if anything, are kind of a challenge. You just have nothing to really grab onto yet or help you grip. I have this perception that people who are tight knitters, and I don't know where I got it, if I made it up or if I've heard it somewhere before, but tight knitters like stainless steel needles because they're slippier. And on my knit stitches, I don't really feel like it's slippery, but as I'm purling, it does just feel a bit slippery. I mean, I know purl stitches are kind of looser usually, but I do feel like my hands are like tensing up on my purled rows compared to my knit rows. So but maybe it's just like placebo. Like, I know that I'm using stainless steel needles. I mean, it's not like my needle is like falling out of my stitches or anything. I don't think I'm a particularly tight or loose knitter. I think I'm pretty even. So maybe I just need to try to relax. Maybe it's kind of in my head, but so far, no big complaints. I've never knitted something at such a tight gauge before, evidenced by me having to buy the needles for it. So it's kind of wild seeing how tiny these stitches are. Yeah, hard to believe that I'm about to embark on knitting an entire top with this tiny gauge, but it feels really nice. I'm liking the way that this yarn fabric feels so far. It's my mid-swatch review. I'm back. It's been about a week. I finished my gauge swatch for the stainless steel needles. Looks like a gauge swatch. Nothing special. I did add this little stitch marker so that I know that this one is for stainless steel. I'm now going to cast on my gauge swatch for the bamboo prim needles and see if there's a difference. So I'm about 20 minutes into my gauge swatch here, just giving an impression. These feel very similar to the needles I'm used to working with, the Clover Takumi bamboo needles. They do feel, the tips actually feel a little more blunt. So that's interesting. I really do not like pointy needles that have very sharp tips. So I would prefer blunt tips over sharp. These just like feel bigger in my hands than the stainless steel ones, but overall I feel like I'm getting the same sort of knitting experience. My gauge swatches so far are looking really similar. I mean, let me take a closer look here. Yeah, they're looking really similar. I mean, it's not over until you block it. So it'll be interesting to see if like a gauge difference or sizing difference comes out during blocking that wasn't present before blocking. Okay, it's the next day. I have both of my samples here. I've blocked and measured them, and it's some interesting results. So there is a difference. I kind of wasn't expecting there to be a difference at all. So first I'll show you the gauge swatch for the stainless steel Chagu needles. It turned out to be very square. When I blocked these swatches, I stretched them pretty far. So the gauge for the stainless steel was 29 stitches and 38 rows. So definitely a tighter gauge than even what the yarn says. The yarn label grab it. The yarn label says that the gauge is about 24 to 28 stitches. So definitely a little bit tighter. But everything looks so neat and even. These stitches are definitely kind of more even than what I'm used to. So with the Prim bamboo needles, I've got 25 stitches by 38 rows. So larger stitch gauge, but the same row gauge, which confuses me. I mean, the sample, definitely, I cast it on the same amount of stitches. I cast it on 36 stitches, and this sample stretched widthwise a lot more than the sample with the stainless steel needles. This is more of a square, and this is more like a stretched out rectangle, but same row gauge. So I don't know what to think of that. I did look up I call this my knitting Bible, the Patty Lyons knitting bag of tricks. She has a little bit of commentary about gauge and row gauge versus stitch gauge. And really the only thing she says about row gauge is differences in row gauge can be caused by many factors: the needle material, the style or method the knitter used, the yarn's fiber content, and the yarn's construction. So you can alter row gauge by changing one of those factors, but the important thing to know is your accurate block to finished row gauge so you can adjust for it. This is really more about like manipulating your knitting based on whatever gauge you happen to get when you're doing a gauge swatch. I think that my stitches don't look quite as even and lovely with this bamboo sample compared to the stainless steel sample. I think these stitches look a lot more even. So that's that. Thanks so much for watching. I'd love to hear if any of you have had experiences with knitting with different material needles, and if you notice a difference in any of these different factors. I was looking just at gauge, but it's interesting to see the difference in the stitch kind of consistency and neatness and how the overall product ends up. It seems like with the bamboo needles, I have a little bit more room for error, whereas with the stainless steel needles, the gauge is almost kind of set in stone. And that can be a really good thing if you want a really consistent product that you know exactly what you're going to get. I think the stainless steel needles might be the best, but the bamboo needles might leave a little more room for error where you can kind of alter things with blocking, which is what I would prefer to have. Let me know what your thoughts are on using different material needles if you have a system. You know, if you use a specific material type for one thing and another material type for another type of project, I'd be really interested to hear what other people use their needles for, or what is your preferred needle. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.